What is up everyone, welcome back to another video on TPL Locs. I'm your host Naomi, and today we will be reviewing someone who has been requested in the past few episodes. I saw his name drop a few times, so I figured we should review his locks today. With that being said, today we are reviewing Joey Badass. So Joey Badass, also known as Jovan Virginie Scott. He is 24 years old and he comes from Brooklyn, New York. He is a rapper, a producer, probably a songwriter. He's everything. He makes music. He's a hip-hop artist. And we are going to start with this first picture of him in 2013. As you can see, he's wearing a bucket hat and he has a very short afro. And that is interesting because most rappers who start their locks that I've seen start with very short hair and then they just start free-forming their hair or retwisting their hair. But in his case, he was already rocking a short afro, so that is really interesting. We jump from 2013 to 2014, and here you can see the length of his hair. He probably has shorter sides because, as you can see, his afro is not really round. He does have some type of, I don't know, style going on there where his hair is probably a good few inches long. His hair is super curly, so that means his hair locks very easily. And yeah, this just to show you what he was working with before he started getting locks. And this is also from 2014, but as you can see here, he started getting starter locks. So I think he didn't freeform his way into locks. He either braided them, two-strand twisted them, or just twisted them and then just waited until they formed teeny tiny baby locks. Here's another picture of him in 2014. I believe this picture was taken before the picture we saw before, but here you can see he two-strand twisted his hair. I don't think this is what he did to his hair and then left it and then they became dreadlocks, because the locks he has now are a bit thinner than this. If he were to lock his hair this way, if he would two-strand twist it like this and just leave it like that, he would get quite thick dreadlocks, and I know that he doesn't have those. So, and then in this last picture that I have of him in 2014, you can see that his hair is really starting to form in tiny dreadlocks. You can see the curly ends of them, so he's not really locked up yet, but that's only to be expected if you are locking your hair in the first year. Although his hair type, I think it's really easy for him to get locks. Picture of him in 2015, he's wearing a hat, but you can see on this side, let me make this picture a bit bigger, that he probably twisted his hair or braided his hair, because it looks to me like he has braids or twists or some type of manipulation that he started in order to get the proper shape of dreadlocks. Because that's also if you have a very specific thickness, width of your dreadlocks in mind, you can start with braids or two-strand twists and make sure that you get the parts the way you want them. Instead of when you freeform, you don't necessarily have a lot of influence on the parts that are going to be forming. Another picture without a hat this time, and you can see that they are truly starting to form, but they are also super loose still. You can see a lot of frizziness around the lock. You can see that if you look at the roots, that they're not well defined yet, and that's what happens when you have starter locks. You start twisting them, but every time you wet your hair, every time you sleep, or every time you wash your hair, it starts becoming undone a little bit. Another picture from a concert of his in 2015, and here you can really start to see that they are starting to form, because you can clearly make out the differences between the individual locks. You can even kind of see his scalp, and that is usually a sign that your locks are starting to form, because at that point they really start to form on their own and they start creating their own parts, so it looks a little bit less frizzy and a little bit more like dreadlocks. 2015 still, and again you can see they are starting to form really well. within the first year and a half of people getting dreadlocks, you have a lot of different looks. Your dreadlocks start out like a mini afro, then they start to form a little bit, then they start to divide themselves properly, and then they start to form all the way towards the root. What I can also see is that he probably shaved a little bit more from the sides, because you can see these locks on the side of his head, but then if he had hair on the side of his head, you would also see locks that drop down lower. So I think at some point he shaved the bottom of the bottom sides of his head in the back. This picture is the same but a little bit more up close, and you can truly see that they are starting to form. This is getting there, and this is almost already truly formed. 2016, here you can see that the hair is starting to get really long as well. So after your hair has formed almost fully into locks, they start growing like crazy. I'm not sure if this is scientifically true, but it always seemed to me like when my hair was fully locked that I started seeing a lot of growth in a small amount of time. You can see that they come down to his nose as opposed to his eyebrows in the previous pictures. He also has some jewelry here in his lock, and there, this looks like a rubber band, or maybe it's build up, I'm not sure. But I think he does retwist his locks from time to time, because you can see a clear distinction between this part of the lock, which is very well defined, and the new growth that is here. I think if he were to freeform his locks, it wouldn't look like such a drastic transition from having a well-defined lock to almost completely loose hair at the roots, but I could be wrong. 2016 still, here he probably braided his locks together because it looks like he has way less than in the picture we saw before. But here we can also start to see that they are starting to grow a lot, and he wears bandanas at this stage. And then because they are starting to get longer, he can start experimenting with different styles. And I was right about what I said a few pictures ago, that he shaved the sides of his head. And they are kind of, I don't know, how would you call this? They're kind of draped to the back, or twisted around each other towards the back, and then put in a ponytail. Maybe he used locks in the back to tie them together. You can still see the piece of jewelry here in his hair. Then another picture of him in 2016. He was featured on Mr. Robot, the TV show. And yeah, I just put this picture in because of the length. You can really see that his hair is starting to grow quickly at this point. 2017, let me make this picture a bit bigger. Here you can see that he obviously retwists his locks because they look super uniform. You can see that at the root, the hair that hasn't locked yet is a bit thinner than the lock that kind of comes after it. And that is what happens when you retwist your hair. Quickly after you've retwisted it, the first few days, you can really see that twist at the roots. I think this picture is a bit too dark to see that, but I would be very surprised if he doesn't retwist his locks. And again, the length, they just keep growing, and I think they suit him really well. And you can also see that if he wears his hair down, you don't even notice that he shaved the sides of his head. So it can be a very multifunctional hairdo to have locks and then shave the sides of your head. And by this time in 2017, they are so long that if he puts them back up in a ponytail, he has that awesome dreadlock bun that you see on a lot of people with long locks, and I think it looks so dope. Something he also does is two-strand twist his locks. As you can see here, he has two-strand twisted them, and he put rubber bands at the end. So it's another way to kind of have different hairstyles even though you have locks. Then we are in 2018. We see the same hairstyle but without the beret, and here you can see some new hair jewelry. I think this was for a music video or some type of event. And what I do like about his hair, and I think that's similar to when I had locks, is that he doesn't often rock the newly retwisted look. When I used to retwist my hair, I wouldn't like the way my hair looked in the first few days because it looked too neat. It just looked too, I don't know, you can see a lot of scalp, and I didn't really like that. And in his case, that's the same. Granted, I think he does retwist his hair, but I don't see him often with the newly retwisted look, which I really like. Now, this was for a music video, and here you can see his hair from the side. You can see how long it's getting, and with the fresh fade, top locks are really it right now. Another picture in 2018, and an interesting hairstyle again. He has kind of woven his locks together, and it's up in kind of like a palm tree on the back of his head. And here we can clearly see that he retwists his hair, because you can hear those smooth parts. That is not yet locked hair, which is retwisted. That is what your hair looks like if you just retwist your hair and you don't have dreadlocks. And the dreadlock itself looks a bit more, I'd say, dry. It doesn't look as shiny after you've put product in it or after you've twisted the hair. And that brings us to the last picture, which is this one. I really love this look on him. He has twisted his hair in multiple twists and tied them back like a crown around his head. And I think this is a look that really makes your hair look neat, even though you have locks. I know a lot of people have that objection when they get dreadlocks, that they fear to be perceived as non-professional, or that it's hard to have a professional hairdo. And this, I think, is one of the hairstyles that you can get with dreadlocks, which looks really neat and still shows off your locks. So with that being said, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, don't forget to give this video a thumbs up. It doesn't really take you a lot of time, but it does really take me a lot of time to make these videos, and I would love to continue to make more. So give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it. Don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already, and I will see you in the next lock review. Peace.